Jiří Procházka
these are knockout shots!
versus Alex Pereira
Oh my goodness!
in the UFC 295 main event was a bout that most certainly lived up to its billing.
Adesanya's on wobbling legs! Whoa! Oh spinning elbow!
For those of us that have wondered who would win between a tribal warrior and a samurai from two different worlds, we got to witness that fantasy matchup in real life. How did we get so lucky? Two electrifying strikers from opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of technique. This was definitely not going to go the distance. So let's take a dive into the UFC 295 headliner and unpack the details of what went down.
The main event of the evening!
When you put two men as dangerous as these guys in there together, you're always going to get fireworks. But one of the most interesting takeaways came from just how much we learned about both men, and in particular, Alex Pereira during this fight. And the opening 90 seconds of this bout certainly set us up for what was to follow.
Champion, will it be Jiří Procházka in the red or Alex Pereira in the yellow?
Jiri's unorthodox bouncing rhythm, coupled with his stance switching and footwork, caused Pereira to sit back at first, allowing Jiri to show him some of his looks. In that time, Pereira eventually started to land his signature leg kicks, and man, you could just see them have an early impact on Procházka. It wasn't quite adding up and hindering his movement, but Jiri wasn't too keen on taking many more of those.
Oh my goodness, he doesn't even show you that he's going to do it.
Pereira has virtually no wind-up on his kicks, and from the get-go, Jiri was firing them off and landing them consistently. And they eventually started to very noticeably knock Jiri off his stride, dropping him to the canvas at one point. All in all, it was money in the bank for Poatan, and though Procházka threatened with one of his wild dipping uppercuts, it was clear that the former middleweight champion was getting the better of the exchanges. Before we had even reached the 2-minute mark, Alex was landing that leg kick at will, and it was starting to bother Jiri, not just in terms of his movement and tentativeness on the feet, but you could actually see the physical damage it was doing through the mark it left on his leg. Pereira was on the outside, peppering his opponent's leg with kicks while offering up a swift left hook every time Jiri tried to close the distance.
By round one.
Look at the boost on the back of his leg.
Not landing it yet, but just showing it to remind the Czech former champ of its danger. By the halfway point of the round, it was becoming clear that Jiri needed to change his tactic.
The thing is, as long as this is a strike.
So far, running into leg kick after leg kick had set the clock against him. You just can't beat a guy like Poatan if your leg is compromised. And so Jiri switched to his wrestling, hoping to catch the veteran kickboxer unaware as he cornered him and shot in for the takedown.
Great job by Jiri!
Pereira's training with Glover Teixeira seems to be paying off more and more with each passing appearance. Not only was he able to defend this shot initially, but he even threatened the neck of Jiri with a guillotine. Maybe not the most determined guillotine effort you'll ever see.
He's deep on that.
Yeah, that's tight!
But Pereira was giving Jiri food for thought, that much is clear. But Jiri's experience would not be denied, and he very easily defended that submission attempt and barreled the Brazilian over to complete the takedown. Remember, Procházka proved that he was no one-trick pony when he went 5 grueling rounds against Pereira's coach, Glover Teixeira, eventually submitting the most successful submission artist in the history of the 205-pound division with a shocking 5th-round rear-naked choke. And Jiri looked like the more dominant mat specialist here over the following minute or so. His long reach and natural power allowed him to rain down ground and pound on Pereira at this point, probably doing enough to steal the round based on the shots and damage he accumulated. Poatan, to his credit, managed to fight his way back to the feet.
And from Pereira, now Procházka.
Landed a nice shot on Jiri as they broke. But despite the leg kicks being the most impactful strikes thrown in this round, if you're going off what most judges tend to value, you gotta edge the round in Procházka's favor, thanks to that time he spent hammering away on Poatan from the top position. And the judges' official scorecard seemed to show that they agreed. All three scored it in favor of Jiri for a 10-9 lead. Round 2 would start at a similar pace to the first, but Jiri was definitely applying more pressure, showing a willingness to stand closer to Pereira, likely in the hopes of negating those leg kicks at range. The first minute would see both men feeling each other out, before Jiri would noticeably turn up the heat, bringing more of his trademark kicks and ducking punches to the table. But nothing was really landing, or at the very least, Pereira did not seem to be bothered by whatever Jiri was doing, at least in the early stages of this round. However, coming up to the halfway point, Procházka started to grow in confidence. Sure, Pereira had landed a solid leg kick or two, but this was becoming Jiri's best stretch of the fight. And after stunning Poatan with a hard shot, Procházka did not relent.
Oh, yes.
Oh, now Pereira returns fire and land.
Some might say he even got a little too wild, opening up with a barrage of strikes, trying to test the endurance of Pereira at 205 pounds. But there are two things to note here. Firstly, Pereira's chin looks to be a hell of a lot better at light heavyweight than it is at middleweight. The lack of a huge weight cut down to the 185-pound limit seems to have given his chin a new lease of life. And secondly, Jiri's lack of defense against solid countershots is a major problem here. Pereira was starting to notice just how easily he could intercept Procházka's bizarre leaping movement with a well-timed left hook. And in the sport of MMA, there is no fighter who throws a left hook as well as Poatan. After surviving Jiri's burst of offense, it started to look like the leg kicks were really having an impact. At this point, Alex was landing them virtually at will. Despite it only being the second round, there was a real sense of desperation starting to creep in. Procházka likely knew that his leg was toast at this point, and to his credit, he came into that final minute of round 2 and landed one of his biggest punches of the fight so far. But Pereira took it well once again, moved backwards and caught Jiri coming in with a 2-punch combo, the second of which was a left hook that landed flush on Procházka's chin and dropped him into a takedown attempt. With Jiri stunned, Alex proceeded to land blow after blow to the side of his totally trapped opponent's head. Procházka was clearly hurting at this point, but then, in a stoppage that, at the time, seemed a little premature, Mark Goddard jumped in and called this one off.
UFC light heavyweight champion.
And in some ways, it was an anticlimax to end on. We'd already seen fights on the prelims of this very same card that were allowed to go on for a longer finishing sequence. But here, while it is easy to see it as an early call, Jiri was most certainly not going to get any better at stopping those leg kicks, and like Israel Adesanya before him during a TKO finish with Alex Pereira in front of him, he likely got saved from a far worse fate. And by his own admission, he was pretty much out of it when Goddard stepped in. Sure, it doesn't exactly feel like the best resolution we could have gotten, but hey, there are still some very concrete takeaways to be had. Alex Pereira becomes just the 9th fighter in UFC history to hold belts in 2 different weight classes.
Alex Pereira!
Showing us just how far an elite martial artist can go if they are shown to have a natural talent for MMA, some clear athleticism, and a drive to improve themselves. Pereira was setting up this finish from the earliest stages, dampening Jiri's explosive movement with his constant leg kicks, while also making reads that would eventually help him to catch Procházka moving in. And though Jiri showed himself to be more than capable of hitting and hurting Pereira, his inability to focus enough on his own defense was the main thing that cost him here. Moving forward, it would be nice to see both men in action again before too long, especially Poatan given his age. For Jiri, he might need to take at least some time off. You could give him a fight with Nikita Krylov next, depending on who is not booked when the time comes. As for Pereira, the only fight that makes sense is most certainly not Israel Adesanya. No, instead, it would be wrong to deprive the division of its chance to shut down any asterisks that may have arisen when Jamal Hill relinquished his belt. The time has come for the 205-pound title discussion to get a lot simpler, and a fight between Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill sounds pretty good to us. But anyway, that will just about do it for this video. What did you make of the UFC 295 main event, and who do you think should be the next in line for the champ Alex Pereira?